In 2021, truck driver Jake Rawlins vanished somewhere along Interstate 35 during a routine delivery run from Tyler, Texas to Oklahoma City. His family filed missing person reports, but with no truck and no leads, the case went cold. 2 years later, construction crews breaking ground for a new oil pipeline in rural Montana made a shocking discovery buried 12 feet underground. Jake's 18-wheeler, pristine except for bullet holes in the cab, sitting in a grave meant to hide it forever. When they finally opened the truck, they discovered a secret that stretched across 5 states, a route no driver ever survived. The call came in at 6:42 a.m. on a Tuesday morning that started like any other for Danny Rawlins. He was checking the air pressure on his Kenworth's tires outside a truck stop in Amarillo when his phone buzzed against his hip. Unknown number, Montana area code. Danny almost ignored it, probably another automated warranty scam. "Yeah?" he answered, wrench still in his hand. "This Danny Rawlins? Brother of Jake Rawlins?" Danny straightened. Nobody had called him about Jake in over a year. "Who's asking?" "Officer Lisa Hartwell, Stillwater County Sheriff's Department. I need you to sit down for this, Mr. Rawlins. We found your brother's truck." The wrench slipped from Danny's fingers and clanged against the asphalt. 2 years. 2 years of driving every route Jake might have taken, checking every truck stop, calling every dispatcher who might have hired him for off-the-books runs. "Where?" Danny's voice came out hoarse. "Rural Montana, about 60 miles north of Billings. Construction crew hit it with an excavator this morning. Mr. Rawlins, the truck was buried. Deliberately." Danny's knees went weak. He leaned against his trailer for support. Is Jake in there? The cab's empty. But Mr. Rawlins, there are bullet holes, multiple shots through the windshield and driver's side door. The parking lot seemed to spin around Danny. Jake's voice echoed in his memory from that last phone call. "Just a quick run to OKC, little brother. Be back Thursday night. Save me some of Mom's cornbread." "Mr. Rawlins, you still there?" "Yeah." Danny swallowed hard. "Yeah, I'm here. What do you need from me?" "We need you to come identify the truck. And Mr. Rawlins, this isn't just about your brother anymore. What we're finding at this site, it's bigger than one missing trucker." 3 hours later, Danny was pushing his rig north on I-27, the speed limit just a suggestion as he chased answers that had been buried in Montana dirt for 2 years. His CB radio crackled with chatter from other drivers, the usual complaints about fuel prices and DOT inspections, but Danny couldn't focus on any of it. Jake's truck, found buried like evidence someone had tried to hide forever. Officer Hartwell's words kept looping in his head. "It's bigger than one missing trucker." What the hell had Jake stumbled into on that routine run to Oklahoma City? And why was his truck 1,500 miles away from where it should have been, shot full of holes and buried in a Montana construction site? Danny grabbed his CB mic. "Breaker 19, this is Longhorn Danny looking for any drivers who might have known Jake Rawlins out of Tyler, Texas. White Peterbilt, vanished 2 years back on I-35. Come back." Static. Then a gravelly voice answered. "Danny, this is Smokestack Joe. Heard about Jake on the news this morning." "Damn shame, brother. You find out what happened to him?" "Still trying to piece it together, Joe? You ever hear of Jake taking loads up to Montana? Off his usual routes?" "Negative on that. Jake was Texas and Oklahoma, maybe Louisiana if the money was right. Never heard him talk about heading north of Kansas. But Danny—" The radio crackled with interference. "Go ahead, Joe." "There was something. About 6 months before Jake went missing. Heard some chatter about independent drivers getting squeezed by new players. Folks offering too-good-to-be-true rates for rush deliveries. Drivers who took those loads started acting funny. Nervous-like." Danny's grip tightened on the mic. "Funny how?" "Can't say for certain, just heard rumors. But Danny, you be careful poking around this. Whatever happened to Jake, it wasn't no accident. And if they buried his truck, they buried it for a reason." The transmission ended in a wash of static. Danny stared at the empty highway stretching ahead, Jake's last words still echoing in his mind. Just a quick run to OKC. So how did a quick run to Oklahoma City end with Jake's bullet-riddled truck buried in a Montana grave? Danny pressed harder on the accelerator. In 8 hours, he'd have some answers, whether he was ready for them or not. The sun was setting behind the Rockies when Danny finally pulled into the gravel lot outside the Stillwater County Sheriff's Department. The building looked like every small-town cop shop he'd ever seen. Brick facade, American flag hanging limp in the still air, a handful of patrol cars parked out front. Officer Hartwell met him at the front desk. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe early 30s, with short brown hair and tired eyes that had seen too much for someone her age. "Mr. Rawlins, thank you for making the drive. I know this can't be easy." Danny nodded, his throat tight. "Can I see it? The truck?" "It's still at the construction site. We've got it cordoned off while the crime scene team processes everything. But first, I need to show you something else we found." She led him down a narrow hallway to a small conference room. On the table sat a clear evidence bag containing Jake's CB radio, the same Cobra 29 he'd saved up for 3 months to buy. "We pulled this from the cab. The last transmission was logged at 11:47 p.m. on March 15th, 2021, the night your brother disappeared." Danny's hands shook as he looked at the radio through the plastic. "What did he say?" Hartwell pressed play on a small recorder. Jake's voice filled the room, tense and scared in a way Danny had never heard before. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Jake Rawlins in a white Peterbilt on I-35 northbound. I got a situation here. Someone's in my cab who shouldn't be. If anyone's listening, tell my brother Danny that they forced me to do this. Tell him I'm sorry." The transmission cut to static. Danny's vision blurred, his brother's last words, full of fear and regret. Someone had forced Jake to do something, but what? "Mr. Rawlins, do you have any idea what your brother might have been forced to do? Any enemies? Money troubles?" "No." Danny's voice cracked. "Jake was clean, never touched drugs, barely drank beer. He was just trying to make enough to buy his own rig, maybe start a small operation." Hartwell made notes. "We'll need you to identify the truck tomorrow morning. But Mr. Rawlins, I have to warn you, what we're uncovering at that construction site is extensive. Your brother may have gotten caught up in something much bigger than a simple hijacking." Danny spent that night in a cheap motel outside Billings, staring at the water-stained ceiling and replaying Jake's final transmission over and over in his head. "Someone's in my cab who shouldn't be. They forced me to do this." At 6 a.m., Officer Hartwell picked him up in a patrol car that smelled like coffee and gun oil. They drove 20 minutes into rolling hills dotted with oil derricks and construction equipment, the kind of boom-and-bust country where fortunes were made and lost with every commodity price swing. "The pipeline company's been real cooperative," Hartwell said as they turned onto a dirt access road. "They shut down the whole section when we told them what we found." Danny's first glimpse of the excavation site made his stomach drop. Crime scene tape fluttered around a pit the size of a swimming pool, dug 15 feet into the red Montana clay. And there, sitting at the bottom like a fossil from another age, was Jake's white Peterbilt. The truck looked almost pristine from a distance until Danny saw the spiderweb of bullet holes across the windshield and the jagged tears in the driver's side door where high-caliber rounds had punched through steel. "Jesus Christ," Danny whispered. "We count at least 12 entry points," Hartwell said. "Whoever did this wanted to make sure your brother couldn't drive away." Danny climbed down the wooden ladder they'd built into the pit, his boots slipping on the clay. Up close, the damage was even worse. The passenger seat was shredded, stuffing and springs exposed like guts. Dark stains on the sleeper berth that could only be blood. "The serial numbers match," Hartwell said, following him down. "VIN, engine block, everything. This is definitely your brother's truck." Danny ran his hand along the bullet-riddled door, feeling the rough edges where metal had been torn apart. "Have you found any remains?" "No human remains in the truck, but Danny, there's something else. Look at this." She led him around to the back of the trailer. The cargo doors hung open, revealing an interior that had been completely gutted and rebuilt. Where there should have been loading space, someone had installed a false floor with hidden compartments underneath. "Drug modifications," Hartwell explained. "Professional grade. This wasn't some amateur operation." Danny crawled inside the trailer, running his hands along the fake floor panels. The craftsmanship was incredible. You'd never know the compartments existed unless you knew exactly where to look. "Jake didn't know about this," Danny said, his voice echoing in the empty space. "He would have told me. We talked about everything." "We believe you. Based on the radio transmission and the physical evidence, it looks like your brother was forced to transport drugs without his knowledge. When he discovered what was happening, they killed him." Danny's fist slammed into the trailer wall. The sound echoed across the excavation site like a gunshot. "Where is he?" Danny's voice broke. "If they killed him, where's his body?" Hartwell's expression grew grim. "That's what we're trying to figure out. But Danny, this excavation has been going on for 3 days now. We found more than just your brother's truck." She led him to the far edge of the pit, where the construction crew had uncovered a concrete foundation buried even deeper than the truck. Danny could see the corners of what looked like a small building, maybe a shed or warehouse, that had been demolished and buried years ago. "Drug processing facility," Hartwell said. "Industrial-grade equipment, chemical residue, the works." "And Danny, we found personal effects, driver's licenses, wallets, CB radios, at least 6 different truckers over the past 5 years." Danny's blood went cold. 6? "Your brother wasn't the first driver they forced into this operation, and based on what we're finding, he probably wasn't the last." A shout from across the excavation interrupted them. One of the crime scene techs was waving them over, holding an evidence bag. "What is it, Rodriguez?" Hartwell called. "Found this wedged under the truck's fuel tank," the tech said. "Looks like someone hid it there on purpose." Inside the evidence bag was a small digital recorder, the cheap kind truckers used to log their hours. The plastic was cracked and dirty, but the LED display still showed a faint battery charge. "That's Jake's," Danny said immediately. "He always kept one running in case the DOT checked his logs." Hartwell looked at the recorder through the plastic. "If your brother hid this before they killed him, it might contain evidence, names, locations, conversations." "Can we listen to it?" "Not here. We'll need to get it back to the lab, make sure we don't contaminate anything. But Danny, if this device contains what I think it does, your brother may have left us a roadmap to whoever killed him." Danny stared at the small recorder, no bigger than a deck of cards. Jake had always been smart, always thinking ahead. If he'd known he was going to die, he would have tried to leave something behind, something that would lead Danny straight to his killers. The Stillwater County Sheriff's Department had exactly one computer forensics expert, and he was a 22-year-old kid named Tommy, who looked like he'd rather be playing video games than extracting data from a dead trucker's recorder. Danny paced the small evidence room while Tommy worked, his boots squeaking against the linoleum floor. Officer Hartwell sat at a metal desk, filling out paperwork and fielding phone calls about the excavation site. "Got something?" Tommy said finally, looking up from his laptop. "The recorder's got about 40 hours of audio logged in the weeks before your brother disappeared. Most of it's routine stuff, CB chatter, engine noise, phone calls home. But there's one conversation that's different." He pulled up an audio file dated March 12, 2021, 3 days before Jake vanished. "This was recorded at a truck stop in Gainesville, Texas. Sounds like your brother was approached by someone." Tommy hit play. Jake's voice came through the speakers, casual at first. "Told you, I'm not interested in rush deliveries. My schedule's full through the end of the month." Then another voice, heavily accented, smooth but insistent. "Come on, amigo." "Just one run, Dallas to Oklahoma City, but you take a small detour. Maybe pick up some extra cargo along the way. 5,000 cash, no questions asked." Danny's hands clenched into fists. Jake's voice on the recording grew wary. What kind of cargo? I don't haul anything without paperwork. Nothing dangerous, just some packages that need to travel quietly. You understand? No, I don't understand, and I'm not interested. Footsteps, then the sound of a truck door slamming. The recording continued for another minute, Jake muttering to himself about sketchy bastards and too good to be true. Tommy paused the playback. There's more. Your brother started recording every interaction after that conversation, like he knew something was wrong. The next file was dated March 15th, the day Jake disappeared. This time, the audio quality was different, muffled, like the recorder was hidden. Jake's voice tense. Danny, if you're hearing this, something happened to me. That guy from Gainesville came back. He's got friends now, and they're not taking no for an answer. The sound of truck doors opening, multiple voices shouting in Spanish and English. They're saying I don't have a choice anymore, that they know where Mom lives, where you run your routes. They've been watching us, Danny. They know everything. A new voice cut through the recording, cold, authoritative. Enough talking, driver. You're going to take our cargo to Oklahoma City. Then you're going to make some new stops. And if you even think about calling the police, your family dies first. The recording went dead. Danny's vision blurred with rage. They'd threatened Mom. They'd threatened him. Jake had agreed to haul drugs to protect his family. There's one more file, Tommy said quietly, recorded about 6 hours later. This time, Jake's voice was barely a whisper. They added stuff to my trailer. Drugs, I think. Lots of it. They got a whole operation, Danny. Trucks coming and going, guys with guns everywhere. It's not just about one delivery. They're moving product all over the country. The sound of highway noise in the background, Jake driving through the night. I'm trying to remember everything. License plates, faces, names. There's a guy they call Santos who's running things. And Danny, there's cops involved. I saw badges, patrol cars. These people got protection. A long pause, then Jake's voice cracked. I'm going to try to get evidence. Try to record everything before they decide I know too much. If something happens to me, you find these bastards. You make them pay for what they did to all those other drivers. The recording cut to static. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Danny wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve, not caring who saw. Officer Hartwell leaned forward. Danny, your brother mentions other drivers, and he says there are police involved. Do you have any idea who he might have been talking about? No, but I'm going to find out. Danny's voice was steel. Jake died trying to get evidence. The least I can do is finish what he started. Hartwell's expression grew concerned. This isn't a one-man job. If there are corrupt cops involved, you could be walking into a trap. Then help me, Danny said. You found Jake's truck. You know there's a drug operation using truckers as mules. What are you going to do about it? Before Hartwell could answer, her radio crackled. A dispatcher's voice filled the room. All units, we've got a situation at the excavation site. Construction crew found another vehicle, requesting additional crime scene personnel and the coroner. Hartwell grabbed her keys. Tommy, make copies of those recordings. Danny, you're coming with me. What do you think they found? Danny asked as they rushed toward the parking lot. I don't know, Hartwell said. But if your brother was right about other drivers disappearing, we're about to find out how deep this thing really goes. They drove back to the excavation site in silence, Danny's mind racing with Jake's final words. You make them pay for what they did to all those other drivers. He intended to do exactly that. The excavation site looked like a crime scene from a war zone. 3 more patrol cars had arrived, along with the county coroner's van and a truck hauling additional digging equipment. Yellow tape now surrounded an area twice the size of what Danny had seen that morning. Officer Hartwell badged her way through the perimeter, Danny close behind. The construction crew stood in a tight cluster near their equipment, hard hats in their hands, faces pale with shock. What do we got, Rodriguez? Hartwell called to the crime scene tech. 2 more vehicles so far, Rodriguez replied, pointing to the expanded pit. Pickup truck, Looks like it's been down there maybe 3 years, and a sedan that's older, maybe 5 years, buried. Danny peered into the excavation. Jake's Peterbilt now looked like just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The pickup truck was wedged against the far wall of the pit, its bed filled with concrete blocks. The sedan was barely visible, just a corner of its roof poking through the clay. "Any signs of—" Hartwell began. "Yeah," Rodriguez said grimly. "Skeletal remains in both vehicles. Coroner's on his way down to make it official, but we're looking at multiple homicides." A sick feeling settled in Danny's stomach. Jake's voice echoed in his memory. "You make them pay for what they did to all those other drivers." "This is where they disposed of anyone who wouldn't cooperate," Danny said. "Jake wasn't the first trucker they tried to force into their operation." Hartwell nodded. "And he wasn't the first one who said no." A shout from the bottom of the pit interrupted them. One of the excavator operators was waving frantically at something near the buried drug facility. "We got more concrete down here," the operator called. "Looks like a whole foundation. This place was bigger than we thought." Hartwell and Danny climbed down into the pit. The drug processing facility they'd discovered yesterday was revealing itself to be much more extensive. What had looked like a small shed was actually part of a complex that stretched underground for hundreds of square feet. "Jesus," Hartwell breathed. "They built a whole distribution center out here." Danny studied the exposed concrete foundations. Remote location, access to major highways, big enough to process serious weight. This wasn't some small-time operation. "And when they were done with it, they buried everything," Hartwell added. "Trucks, bodies, equipment, made it disappear like it never existed." The coroner, a gray-haired man named Dr. Peterson, emerged from examining the pickup truck. His expression was grim. Male victim, approximately 25 to 35 years old, based on bone structure. Single gunshot wound to the back of the skull, execution style. Vehicle's been down there at least 3 years, maybe 4. He moved to the sedan. Female victim here, similar age range. Also gunshot wound, but to the chest. This one's older. I'd estimate 5 years minimum. Danny's fists clenched. They killed anyone who got in their way. Men, women, didn't matter. "Danny," Hartwell said quietly, "if this operation was running for 5 years or more, and they were forcing truckers to transport drugs, where do you think they got their drivers?" The implication hit Danny like a punch to the gut. Truck stops. They'd scout independent drivers, guys who needed money, guys who wouldn't be missed right away if they disappeared. And if a driver refused, or if they tried to expose the operation, they ended up buried with their trucks. Danny stared at the excavation, imagining how many more vehicles might be hidden under the Montana clay. "Hartwell, we need to check missing person reports. Every trucker who disappeared in this region over the past 5 years. "Already on it. I've got calls out to departments in 4 states. Dr. Peterson climbed out of the sedan, shaking his head. "There's something else down here. Looks like a storage area, separate from the processing facility. Might have been an office or records room." He led them to a section of the foundation where concrete blocks had been arranged to form a small enclosed space. The construction crew had partially cleared it, revealing metal file cabinets and waterproof storage containers. "If they kept records of their operation," Hartwell said, "invoices, delivery schedules, driver information, we'd have everything we need to identify their network," Danny finished. Rodriguez was already setting up equipment to safely extract the storage containers. "This is going to take a few hours. We need to document everything before we move it." Danny's phone buzzed. Unknown number, Texas area code. "Danny Rawlins," he answered. "Danny, this is Smokestack Joe from yesterday. Listen, I've been asking around about your brother, and I got some information you need to hear." "Go ahead, Joe." "There's a driver named Carlos Mendez runs loads between Houston and Denver. He says about 6 months ago, some guy approached him at the Flying J in Amarillo. Same deal your brother mentioned. Easy money for a simple delivery, but take some extra cargo, no questions asked." Danny's pulse quickened. "What happened?" "Carlos got spooked and said no. But here's the thing. The guy who approached him had a badge. Local sheriff from somewhere up north. Carlos remembers the name because it was painted on his patrol car. Brennan. Danny nearly dropped the phone. A corrupt sheriff, just like Jake had recorded. Joe, did Carlos get a first name? A description? Big guy, maybe 50, 55, red face like he drinks too much. And Danny, Carlos says this Brennan character knew things about him, where he lived, where his kids went to school, like he'd been watching him. Where can I find Carlos? That's the problem, Danny. Carlos ain't been seen in 3 months. His dispatcher says he took a load to Colorado and never checked in. Carlos's wife is scared to death, been calling every truck stop between Houston and Denver. Danny's blood went cold. Another missing driver, another family destroyed. Joe, if you hear anything else, I will, but Danny, you watch yourself. If this Brennan character is dirty law, he's got resources. He can make problems disappear. The line went dead. Danny stared at his phone, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. A corrupt sheriff named Brennan, missing drivers who wouldn't cooperate, a drug operation that buried its evidence so deep it took an oil pipeline to uncover it. Jake had been right about everything, and now Danny had a name to go with the badge. Sheriff Brennan was about to get a visit from a very angry brother. Danny spent the next 2 hours watching crime scene techs extract waterlogged documents from the buried storage containers. Most of the papers were too damaged to read, but a few items survived the years underground. Plastic-wrapped ledgers, laminated driver's licenses, and a metal lockbox that had kept its contents dry. Officer Hartwell spread the recovered driver's licenses across a folding table. Danny's stomach turned as he counted them. 15 different licenses from 12 different states, all belonging to truck drivers who'd vanished over the past 5 years. Carlos Mendez, Hartwell said, holding up a Houston license, reported missing 3 months ago, just like your contact said. Danny picked up another license. Maria Santos, Dallas, independent owner-operator. He looked at the photo, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and a determined smile. When did she disappear? According to the missing person report, about 18 months ago. Left Dallas with a load bound for Albuquerque, never arrived. The ledgers told an even grimmer story. Handwritten entries in Spanish and English documented drug shipments, delivery routes, and driver assignments. Some entries were marked with a simple X next to the driver's name, notation for the ones who hadn't cooperated. This is evidence of a massive operation, Hartwell said, photographing each page. Multi-state drug trafficking using legitimate truckers as unwitting mules. And look at this. She pointed to a section labeled Protection Costs with monthly payments listed to various law enforcement agencies. The largest recurring payment was labeled B-Sheriff Department, Montana-$25,000 per month. $25,000 a month to Sheriff Brennan, Danny said. No wonder they operated for years without getting caught. Hartwell's radio crackled. Hartwell, this is dispatch. Got a call for you from the FBI field office in Billings. Agent requests immediate contact regarding your excavation. The feds are getting involved, Hartwell said. That's good. We're going to need resources to take down an operation this size. But Danny was studying the ledger entries more carefully. Hartwell, look at the dates on these protection payments. The last entry is from 2 months ago. So this operation is still active. They didn't shut down when they buried Jake's truck. They just moved somewhere else. Before Hartwell could respond, her phone rang. She answered with her usual professional tone, but Danny watched her expression change to alarm. When? How long ago? She grabbed a pen and started writing. We'll be right there. She hung up and turned to Danny, her face pale. That was Sheriff Brennan's department. Someone broke into the evidence locker at the courthouse last night. Stole files related to missing person cases. Danny's blood went cold. He knows we found the burial site. Gets worse. The dispatcher says Sheriff Brennan left town this morning on personal business. No return date given. He's running. Or cleaning up loose ends. Hartwell grabbed her keys. "Danny, I need you to stay here with the crime scene team. If Brennan's involved in this operation, I can't risk putting you in danger." "Like hell, I'm staying here. Jake died trying to expose these people. I'm not going to sit on the sidelines while they cover their tracks." Hartwell studied his face for a long moment. "You're not a cop, Danny. You don't have training for this kind of situation." "But I know trucking. I know the routes, the stops, the way drivers think. You need me." "Fine, but you follow my lead and do exactly what I say. One wrong move, and we could both end up buried in another hole." They drove back toward Billings, Hartwell on the radio coordinating with state police and FBI. Danny stared out the window at the rolling Montana landscape, imagining Jake driving this same route 2 years ago with a gun to his head. "There's something that's been bothering me," Danny said as they hit the highway. "The timeline doesn't add up." "How so?" Jake disappeared in March 2021, but according to those ledgers, the drug operation was still running until at least 2 months ago. If they killed Jake because he was going to expose them, why didn't they shut down immediately? Hartwell considered this. Maybe they thought they'd eliminated the threat. Maybe Jake didn't have time to contact anyone before they killed him. Or maybe he did contact someone and that person kept quiet. "What do you mean?" Danny's mind was racing. Jake was smart. If he knew he was in danger, he would have tried to get information to someone he trusted, someone in law enforcement. "But you said he didn't know any cops." "No, but truckers deal with DOT officers, state troopers, local police all the time. If Jake had evidence of a drug operation, he might have tried to pass it along before they killed him." Hartwell's radio crackled with an incoming transmission. "All units, Bolo for Sheriff Cole Brennan, white male, 52 years old, last seen driving a dark blue F-150, Montana plates Charlie Delta 7 4922. Consider armed and dangerous." "There's our confirmation," Hartwell said. "Brennan's officially a fugitive." Danny's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll join your brother." He showed the message to Hartwell. Her jaw tightened. "They're watching us. Probably have been since you arrived in Montana." "Good," Danny said, surprising her. "Let them watch. Maybe they'll make a mistake." "Danny, these people have killed at least 15 drivers that we know of. They're not going to hesitate to kill us if we get too close." "Then we better make sure we get them first." Hartwell's phone rang again. This time, the conversation was brief and tense. When she hung up, her expression was grim. That was the FBI. They intercepted radio chatter about a truck convoy heading north toward the Canadian border. Multiple vehicles, heavy escort. Could be the operation trying to relocate. "Where?" "Highway 2 near the Glacier National Park area. Remote, lots of back roads, easy to disappear into the wilderness." Danny looked at the clock on the dashboard. "How far?" 3 hours if we push it." "Then let's go. If they're moving the operation, this might be our only chance to catch them in the open." Hartwell hesitated. "Danny, if we're right about this, we're talking about armed drug traffickers with nothing to lose. This isn't some truck stop disagreement you can settle with your fists." "I know," Danny said quietly. "But Jake died trying to stop these people. I'm not going to let his death be for nothing." Hartwell studied his determined expression, then hit the sirens and floored the accelerator. "All right, but we're calling for backup every step of the way. And Danny, when we find these bastards, you let the law handle them." Danny nodded, but his hands were already clenched into fists. The law had failed Jake 2 years ago. This time, Danny was going to make sure justice was served. The convoy was exactly where the FBI said it would be, a line of 6 18-wheelers escorted by 2 pickup trucks, moving north on Highway 2 like a funeral procession. Danny and Hartwell watched from a ridge overlooking the road, binoculars focused on the vehicles crawling through the mountain passes below. "That's a lot of firepower for a simple drug run," Hartwell murmured, counting the armed men visible in the pickup beds. Danny studied the lead truck through his binoculars. Those aren't random drivers. Look how tight they're running. Perfect spacing, coordinated speeds. These guys have done this before. FBI's got units moving to block the highway at both ends, Hartwell said, checking her radio. Border patrols coordinating from the north. We should have them boxed in within the hour. But Danny was focused on something else, the last truck in the convoy. Unlike the others, which looked like standard freight haulers, this one had modifications. Reinforced bumpers, extra antennas, and windows that were too dark to see through. Hartwell, that rear truck, it's not carrying cargo. She swung her binoculars toward the vehicle Danny was watching. Mobile Command Center, they're running the operation from inside that truck. Which means if we want answers about what happened to Jake, we need to take that truck intact, Hartwell finished. I'll radio the FBI, tell them to focus on stopping the command vehicle. While Hartwell coordinated with the federal agents, Danny kept watching the convoy. Something was bothering him about the way they were moving. Too organized, too calm for people who knew law enforcement was closing in. Hartwell, what if this is a decoy? What do you mean? Think about it. They know we found the burial site. They know Brennan's blown his cover. Why would they risk moving their entire operation in broad daylight on a major highway? Hartwell lowered her radio. You think they want us to follow them? I think they're leading us away from something more important. Before Hartwell could respond, the convoy below suddenly changed direction. Instead of continuing north toward the border, the trucks turned east onto a smaller highway that wound deeper into the mountains. That's not the route to Canada, Hartwell said. Danny's phone buzzed with another text. Your brother begged for his life. You will too. This time there was an attachment, a grainy photo that made Danny's blood run cold. It showed Jake on his knees in what looked like a concrete room, hands zip-tied behind his back, a gun pressed to the back of his head. Son of a bitch, Danny whispered. They're not running. They're leading us to where they killed Jake. Hartwell saw the photo and immediately grabbed her radio. All units, abort pursuit. Repeat, abort pursuit. We have reason to believe this is a trap. But the radio crackled with interference. Then a voice Danny recognized from Jake's recordings, the cold, authoritative tone that had threatened his family. Too late, Officer Hartwell. You and the brother, you follow the trucks. You come alone, no backup, no FBI, or we start killing the drivers we're holding. The transmission cut to static. They're jamming our communications, Hartwell said, trying multiple radio frequencies. And they've got hostages. Danny stared at the convoy disappearing into the mountains. How many drivers do you think they've taken over the years? Based on what we found at the burial site, could be dozens. Danny, we can't go in there alone. It's suicide. Maybe, but if we wait for backup, those hostages are dead. Hartwell studied the mountain road the convoy had taken. There's an old mining town up there called Silver Creek. Been abandoned for decades, but the roads are still passable. Perfect place to hold prisoners, Danny said. Remote, no cell service, only one way in and out. Which makes it perfect for an ambush, too. Danny thought about Jake's final recording, his brother's voice cracking as he tried to leave evidence behind. You make them pay for what they did to all those other drivers. Hartwell, what if we don't follow them directly? You know this area better than I do. Are there other routes to Silver Creek? Old mining roads, but they're rough. 4-wheel drive only, and they add at least an hour to the trip. But they might not expect us to come that way. Hartwell considered this. It's risky. If we get stuck up there, no one's going to find us for days. And if we don't try, those hostages are going to end up buried in another hole. Hartwell made her decision. There's a mining road about 10 miles east. It's not on most maps, but it connects to the Silver Creek area. We'll need to go back and approach from a different direction. They climbed back into the patrol car and headed east, away from the convoy's route. As they drove, Danny's mind kept returning to the photo on his phone. Jake on his knees, terrified, but still defiant. They kept him alive for a while, Danny said quietly. What? Jake. In that photo, he looks like he'd been beaten, but he was still fighting. They didn't just execute him immediately? Maybe they were trying to get information from him, find out who else he might have told about the operation. Or maybe they were using him as leverage against other drivers, cooperate or end up like Jake Rawlins. The mining road was everything Hartwell had warned, barely 2 tire tracks carved into the mountainside with drop-offs that made Danny's stomach lurch. But it was taking them exactly where they needed to go, approaching Silver Creek from the blind side. As they climbed higher into the mountains, Danny caught glimpses of the abandoned mining town through the trees. A collection of weathered buildings clustered around what had once been a mill, connected by a network of dirt roads and mining equipment that had been left to rust for decades. And parked among the abandoned buildings, the 6 trucks from the convoy. "They're here," Hartwell said, pulling over behind a stand of pine trees. "Now what?" Danny studied the town through binoculars. "I count at least 12 armed men. They've got guards posted on the main roads, but they're not watching the mining trails. Because they don't expect anyone to be stupid enough to come up the back way." Sometimes stupid is the only thing that works. Hartwell checked her weapon and spare ammunition. "If we're doing this, we do it smart. We get in, locate the hostages, and get out. No heroics." Danny nodded, but his eyes were fixed on the largest building in the town, an old mining office that had been converted into some kind of command center. Vehicles coming and going, armed guards at every entrance. If Jake was still alive, that's where they'd be keeping him. And if he wasn't, that's where Danny would find the people responsible for his death. The approach to Silver Creek took them over an hour, crawling through abandoned mining shafts and rusted equipment that created a maze of cover. Danny's knees were scraped raw from belly crawling over sharp rocks, but the pain kept him focused. Hartwell moved like she'd done this before, using hand signals and staying low as they worked their way toward the converted mining office. Through gaps in the rusted machinery, Danny could see guards patrolling the perimeter, but their attention was focused on the main road, not the mountainside behind them. "There," Hartwell whispered, pointing to a loading dock behind the main building. "That door's only got 1 guard, and he's smoking instead of watching." Danny studied the layout. "What about vehicles?" "If we find hostages, we'll need a way to get them out." "Those pickup trucks by the mill, keys are probably inside. These guys aren't expecting to need a quick getaway." They waited until the smoking guard wandered around the corner, then sprinted across open ground to the loading dock. Danny's heart hammered as they pressed against the concrete wall, waiting to see if anyone had spotted them. Silence except for the wind whistling through abandoned mining equipment. Hartwell tried the door handle. Locked, but the wood frame was rotted. A few kicks and it gave way with a splintering crack that sounded like thunder in the mountain air. They froze, weapons ready, but no shouts of alarm came from inside. The building's interior had been converted into a makeshift prison. Chains bolted to the walls, concrete floors stained with things Danny didn't want to think about, and a smell of fear and desperation that made his stomach turn. But the holding area was empty. "Where are they?" Danny whispered. Hartwell pointed to fresh tire tracks in the dust. "Moved recently. Maybe when they saw us following the convoy." They moved deeper into the building, checking every room. Office space converted to living quarters for the guards. A communications room with radio equipment and maps showing trucking routes across 5 states. And in the back corner, a room that made Danny's blood freeze. Personal effects, wallets, driver's licenses, family photos, wedding rings, all sorted into plastic bins like inventory in a warehouse. Danny recognized Jake's wallet immediately, the leather cracked from years of riding in his back pocket. "Jesus Christ," Hartwell breathed. "How many people did they kill?" Danny opened Jake's wallet with shaking hands. Everything was still there, driver's license, credit cards, and folded behind them, a photo of their family from Christmas 3 years ago. Jake, Danny, and their mother around the tree, everyone smiling. "They kept trophies," Danny said, his voice raw with anger. A door slammed somewhere in the building. Footsteps echoed off concrete walls, getting closer. Hartwell grabbed Danny's arm and pulled him toward a side exit, but they were too late. 3 armed men rounded the corner, weapons already drawn. "Well, well," said the leader, a thin man with dead eyes and prison tattoos covering his neck. "Looks like the brother came looking for his family reunion." Danny recognized the voice from Jake's recordings, the one who'd threatened their mother, who'd forced Jake into the drug operation. "Where is he?" Danny demanded. "Where's Jake?" The man laughed. "You really think your brother's still breathing after 2 years? Man, you truckers are dumber than I thought." "The photo," Danny said. "Someone sent me a photo of Jake alive." "That old thing?" "Hell, we took that picture 2 years ago, right before we put a bullet in his head. But it comes in handy for situations like this." Rage exploded in Danny's chest. He lunged forward, but one of the other gunmen stepped in with a rifle butt to his ribs. Danny went down hard, gasping for air. "Easy there, hero," the leader said. "You're going to get your chance to join your brother. But first, we got some questions. Like who else knows about our operation? How many cops you talked to? How much evidence you got?" Hartwell kept her weapon trained on the group, but she was outnumbered and outgunned. "FBI knows everything. You kill us, and they'll tear this mountain apart looking for you. FBI's chasing ghosts on the highway right now. By the time they figure out we led them the wrong way, we'll be long gone. New location, new operation, new trucks to move our product." The leader gestured to his men. "Take them to the processing room. We'll get our answers, one way or another." They were marched at gunpoint to a different building, this one equipped with industrial-grade equipment that had nothing to do with mining. Drug processing machinery, scales, packaging materials, and in the center of the room, a metal chair with restraints. The same kind of chair they'd found at the buried facility. "Your brother sat in that chair for 3 days before he gave us what we wanted," the leader said, running his hand along the metal armrest. "Told us everything about his roots, his contacts, his family. Real talkative once we started working on him." Danny's vision blurred with fury. "You son of a bitch!" "Oh, I'm just getting started. See, your brother made us a lot of trouble before he died. Had to shut down our whole operation, move everything up here to the mountains, cost us millions of dollars in lost product." The leader pulled out a pistol and pressed it against Danny's temple. "So we're going to take our time with you. Make sure you pay for every penny your brother cost us." But before he could say another word, the building's lights went out. Emergency generators kicked in a second later, but in that moment of darkness, Hartwell moved. The sound of gunfire filled the room. 3 quick shots, then silence. When Danny's eyes adjusted to the dim emergency lighting, 2 of the gunmen were down, and Hartwell was rolling behind a piece of machinery, bleeding from her shoulder, but still fighting. The leader spun toward her, but Danny was already moving. 2 years of rage and grief exploded as he tackled the man, driving him backward into the processing equipment. They went down together, fists flying. The leader was armed, but Danny was bigger and fueled by a fury that had been building since Jake's first day missing. Danny's fist connected with the man's jaw, once, twice, until he heard bone crack. The pistol skittered across the concrete floor. "Where did you bury him?" Danny roared, pinning the man down. "Where's my brother's body?" Blood ran from the leader's broken nose. "Go to hell!" Danny grabbed a wrench from the nearby workbench and held it over the man's head. "I'll ask one more time. Where is Jake?" The leader's eyes went wide with fear, the same fear Jake must have felt in his final moments. "Canyon," he gasped, 3 miles north of the old burial site. We dumped him in a ravine." Danny's hand shook as he held the wrench. Every fiber of his being wanted to crush this man's skull, to make him pay for what he'd done to Jake and all the other drivers. But Jake's voice echoed in his memory. "You make them pay for what they did to all those other drivers. Justice, not revenge." Danny dropped the wrench and zip-tied the leader's hands behind his back with restraints from his own processing room. "Hartwell, you okay?" "I'll live," she called back, applying pressure to her shoulder wound. "But we need to get out of here. That gunfire's going to bring the rest of them running." As if on cue, shouts echoed from outside the building, vehicle engines starting up, men calling out coordinates. "Back exit," Hartwell said, struggling to her feet. "We can make it to those trucks if we move now." They dragged the surviving gunmen with them as they escaped into the mountain night. Behind them, Silver Creek erupted in chaos as the drug operation realized their leaders were down and their operation was blown. But Danny wasn't thinking about escape. He was thinking about a ravine 3 miles north of the burial site, where his brother's remains had been waiting 2 years for someone to bring him home. The stolen pickup truck bounced over mining roads in the darkness, headlights cutting through mountain air thick with the smell of pine and old snow. Hartwell pressed a torn shirt against her shoulder wound while Danny drove, the zip-tied drug leader groaning in the truck bed behind them. "FBI should have our location in about 20 minutes, Hartwell said, checking her restored radio. "Signal's stronger now that we're out of the canyon." But Danny wasn't listening. His mind was fixed on the ravine 3 miles north of the original burial site, where Jake had been lying in the Montana wilderness for 2 years. "We need to go there first," Danny said. "Danny, you're bleeding, I'm bleeding, and we've got a prisoner who needs medical attention. The ravine can wait until—" "No." Danny's voice was steel. "I've waited 2 years to bring my brother home. I'm not waiting another day." Hartwell studied his profile in the dashboard light. The same stubborn determination she'd seen when he first walked into her office, but tempered now with something deeper. Purpose. "All right," she said quietly. "But we call for backup first. If there are more bodies in that ravine, it's a crime scene." The original excavation site looked different at night. Crime scene tape fluttered in the wind, and portable lights cast harsh shadows over the pit where Jake's truck had been buried. But Danny was focused on the landscape beyond, rolling hills and rocky outcroppings that could hide a dozen ravines. 3 miles north, Danny said, checking his phone's GPS. "That puts us somewhere near Willow Creek." "I know the area," Hartwell said. "Lots of old cattle trails, lots of places to hide a body." They drove slowly, scanning the terrain with flashlights. The prisoner in the truck bed had stopped groaning and started talking, partly from fear, partly from the concussion Danny had given him. "You're not going to find him," the man mumbled. "Animals, weather, 2 years, ain't nothing left but bones." Danny slammed on the brakes so hard the truck skidded sideways. He was out of the cab and over the tailgate before Hartwell could stop him, grabbing the prisoner by his shirt. "You tell me exactly where you put him, or I'm going to throw you down every ravine until I find the right one." "Danny, stop!" Hartwell shouted. "He's our only witness. You kill him, we lose everything." But the prisoner was already talking, words tumbling over themselves. "East side of Willow Creek, maybe half a mile up from the road. There's a big fallen tree. Lightning strike. We threw him over the edge there." Danny released him and climbed back into the truck. His hands were shaking with adrenaline and grief, but his voice was steady. "How far to Willow Creek?" 10 minutes, Hartwell said. "But Danny, if your brother's down there, bringing him up is going to take professional equipment. Search and rescue, maybe helicopters." "I don't care. I need to see for myself." Willow Creek cut through a valley lined with granite outcroppings and scrub brush. Danny found the fallen tree exactly where the prisoner had described. A massive pine that had been split by lightning, its trunk bridging a ravine maybe 40 feet deep. Danny got out of the truck and walked to the edge, shining his flashlight into the darkness below. The beam picked out scattered rocks, dead branches, and something else that made his breath catch. Fabric, faded blue denim, partially buried under 2 years of debris. "Hartwell," Danny called, his voice cracking. "I found him." She joined him at the edge of the ravine, her own flashlight adding to the light below. Danny could make out more details now: boots, the remains of a flannel shirt, and scattered among the rocks, bones bleached white by mountain weather. "Jesus," Hartwell whispered. "They just threw him away like garbage." Danny's knees gave out. He sat heavily on the edge of the ravine, staring down at what remained of his brother. 2 years of searching, 2 years of hope and despair, and Jake had been lying here the whole time. "I should have found him sooner," Danny said, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his face. "Should have kept looking." "You found him now. That's what matters." Danny's phone buzzed, a text from the same unknown number that had been taunting him. "Your brother's not the only one down there." He showed the message to Hartwell, who immediately called for additional search teams. "If there are other victims in that ravine, we need to process the entire area." But Danny was thinking about something else. "Hartwell, what if Jake wasn't dead when they threw him down there?" "What do you mean?" "The prisoner said they threw him over the edge, not that they shot him first, not that they killed him before disposing of the body. What if Jake survived the fall?" Hartwell studied the ravine with new eyes. "It's possible, 40 feet onto rocks, but if he landed in the right spot, he could have lived for hours, maybe days." Danny's voice was raw with anguish. Lying down there, hurt, waiting for help that never came. "Danny, don't do this to yourself. There's no way to know what happened." But Danny was already moving, looking for a way down into the ravine. "There," he said, pointing to a series of ledges that formed a natural staircase. "I can get down there." "Absolutely not. We wait for search and rescue." "I'm not leaving him down there another night." Before Hartwell could stop him, Danny was over the edge, using roots and handholds to lower himself into the ravine. His boots slipped on loose rocks, but he kept going, driven by 2 years of grief and the need to bring his brother home. The descent took 10 minutes. When Danny reached the bottom, he found himself in a narrow canyon maybe 20 feet wide, littered with debris from flash floods and rock slides. And there, partially buried under a pile of branches, was Jake. Danny approached slowly, flashlight beam trembling in his hand. His brother's remains were scattered by scavengers and weather, but enough remained to confirm what Danny had known in his heart since the day Jake disappeared. Jake Rawlins was never coming home, not the way Danny had hoped. But as Danny knelt beside his brother's remains, something caught his eye. Scratched into the rock face nearby, barely visible under years of weather, were letters carved with what looked like a piece of metal. D-A-N-N-Y. Jake had survived the fall. He'd lived long enough to leave a message, a final connection to the brother who'd never stopped looking for him. Danny pressed his palm against the carved letters, feeling the rough edges where Jake had used his last strength to reach across 2 years of silence. "I found you, brother," Danny whispered. "I finally found you." Above him, Hartwell's voice echoed off the canyon walls. "Search and rescue's here, Danny. They're bringing you both up." But Danny wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. He had something to tell Jake first. "I got them," he said to the empty canyon. "The people who did this to you, who hurt all those other drivers. They're going to pay for what they did. I promise you that." The wind picked up, whistling through the ravine like an answer. Like forgiveness. Like peace. The search and rescue operation took 6 hours. Danny sat in an ambulance, getting his cuts stitched, while teams worked with ropes and pulleys to bring Jake's remains up from the ravine. Every piece of bone, every scrap of fabric, every small thing that had once been his brother. When they found Jake's wallet in the rocks, still containing the Christmas photo, Danny finally broke down completely. "Take your time," said the EMT, a kind woman named Rosa, who'd seen plenty of grief in her years on mountain rescues. "There's no rush now." By dawn, they'd recovered the remains of 4 victims from the ravine. Jake, Carlos Mendez from Houston, and 2 other drivers whose licenses had been in the storage containers at the burial site, each one thrown away like garbage when they wouldn't cooperate with the drug operation. Sheriff Cole Brennan was arrested at a cabin near the Canadian border, trying to destroy documents that connected him to 5 years of drug trafficking and murder. The FBI found bank records showing payments totaling over $1 million from the cartel in exchange for protection and information about law enforcement activities. But it was the prisoner Danny had captured, Miguel Santos, the cartel lieutenant who'd been running the trucking operation, who provided the details that broke the case wide open. 23 drivers over 5 years, FBI agent Patricia Voss told Danny as they sat in the Billings field office. Santos gave us names, dates, burial locations. Some will never recover, but at least the families will know what happened. Danny stared at the map on the conference room wall, marked with red pins showing grave sites across Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas. Each pin represented a family destroyed, a life ended because someone wouldn't haul drugs. "What about the operation?" Danny asked. "Is it really over?" The Montana cell is finished, but this was part of something bigger, a network that stretches from Mexico to Canada. We're coordinating with agencies in 6 states to roll up the entire organization. And the other drivers? The ones who cooperated? Agent Voss consulted her notes. Most of them didn't know they were carrying drugs, modified trailers, hidden compartments, threats to their families if they asked questions. They were victims too. Danny thought about Jake's final recording. "They know where Mom lives, where you run your routes. They've been watching us." Fear. That's how the operation had worked for so long. Keep drivers scared, keep families threatened, make cooperation seem like the only way to survive. "What happens now?" Danny asked. "Santos and Brennan will be charged with multiple counts of murder, drug trafficking, and conspiracy. With the evidence your brother left behind and what we found at the burial sites, they'll never see daylight again." "And the families? The other victims' families?" "They'll finally have answers. And closure. Your brother saved a lot of lives by fighting back, Danny. If he hadn't left that evidence, this operation might still be running." Danny walked out of the FBI building into the Montana morning, feeling empty and exhausted. Jake was gone, had been gone for 2 years. But at least now Danny knew the truth. His brother hadn't abandoned his family or chosen to haul drugs. He'd been a victim who became a hero, dying to protect others from the same fate. The funeral was held in Tyler, Texas, where Jake had lived his whole life, except for those final terrible days in Montana. The entire trucking community turned out. Hundreds of drivers who'd known Jake, worked with him, respected him as one of their own. Danny stood at the graveside as Jake's remains were lowered into Texas soil, finally home after 2 years in a Montana ravine. Their mother held his arm, her face wet with tears, but peaceful for the first time since Jake had disappeared. "He saved so many people," she whispered. "All those other families who'll get their answers because of what Jake did." Danny nodded, thinking about the carved letters Jake had left in the canyon wall. Even dying, even broken and alone, his brother had been thinking about Danny, leaving a message that said, "I was here. I fought. I didn't give up." After the service, Danny drove his rig east on Interstate 20, back to the roots he knew, the life he understood. But everything was different now. Every truck stop, every way station, every CB conversation carried the memory of Jake's fight against the people who preyed on drivers. His radio crackled with a familiar voice. "Breaker 19, this is Smokestack Joe looking for Longhorn Danny." "You out there, brother?" Danny picked up the mic. "I'm here, Joe." "Heard about the service, heard about everything they found up in Montana. Just wanted you to know. Jake's story is spreading. Drivers all over the country are talking about it, about how he fought back." "Good," Danny said. "Maybe it'll help other drivers recognize the warning signs, help them stay safe." "Already is. Got a call yesterday from a driver in New Mexico. Someone approached him with one of those too-good-to-be-true deals, but he remembered Jake's story and called the state police instead." Danny's throat tightened. Jake's sacrifice was still protecting people, still saving lives. "Joe, keep spreading the word. Tell every driver you meet about what happened to Jake. Make sure they know the signs." "Will do, brother. And Danny. Your brother would be proud. You didn't give up, just like he didn't give up. That takes the same kind of courage." The transmission ended, leaving Danny alone with the highway and his memories. But for the first time in 2 years, the memories didn't hurt. They felt like strength. Jake Rawlins had been murdered for refusing to haul drugs. But his story, his fight, his evidence, his final message, carved into Montana stone, had brought down an entire criminal network and saved countless other drivers from the same fate. That was the legacy of a true trucker, a man who'd rather die than betray his principles. Danny keyed his mic one more time, broadcasting on the channel every driver monitored. This is Longhorn Danny with a message for every independent out there. If someone offers you easy money for questionable cargo, remember Jake Rawlins. Remember that some prices are too high to pay. And remember that there are always people listening who want to help. Stay safe out there, drivers. Jake would want you to make it home. He set the mic aside and drove east into the Texas dawn, carrying his brother's memory and his brother's mission. The highway stretched ahead, endless and familiar, full of good drivers doing honest work. Jake was finally at peace. And Danny had a job to do, keeping other drivers safe, keeping Jake's story alive, making sure no family ever had to wonder what happened to their brother for 2 long years. The 18-wheeler rolled on through the morning light, its CB antenna reaching toward the sky like a prayer, like a promise, like hope that never dies.